Olympic National Park Mystery. How DNA identified human remains found in a sleeping bag. After 25 years, Camernator, did you now? Sometimes a true crime story is not solved with a dramatic arrest, a confession, or a courtroom moment. Sometimes it is solved when a person who vanished from the world finally gets their name back. Tonight's true crime story takes us deep into Olympic National Park in Washington State, where skeletal remains were discovered more than 25 years ago inside a sleeping bag near the Solduke River. For decades, investigators did not know who the person was. There was no quick identification, no immediate family match, no clear public timeline, just remains, camping items, and a mystery buried in one of the most remote and beautiful landscapes in the country. But now, after years of unanswered questions, authorities say advanced DNA testing has finally identified the remains as Joseph Louis Serrao Jr., a man born in 1960 who had last been in contact with his family in 1998. The case began in July 2000, when skeletal remains were discovered in a remote area of Olympic National Park, along the Solduke River. The remains were found inside a sleeping bag near a tent area. Investigators also recovered camping gear and personal items, including binoculars and other materials that could potentially hold clues. At first glance, this might seem like a wilderness death investigation. A person enters a national park. They camp near a river. Something happens. They are not found until later. But when a body is found in a remote area, especially after time has passed, investigators have to consider every possibility. Was it exposure? Was it an accident? Was it suicide? Was it foul play? Did someone leave the person there? Did the person go into the park intentionally to disappear? The problem is that time destroys evidence. Weather changes everything. Animals disturb scenes. Water, mold, dirt, and plant growth can damage clothing, documents, fingerprints, and biological material. So the first mission was basic but difficult: identify the person. In 2000, investigators tried to identify the remains using the tools available at the time, but the case stalled. Authorities attempted forensic examinations and tried to recover fingerprints from items found near the remains, including binoculars and camping gear. But those efforts did not produce an identification. That is a critical detail. In many older unidentified remains cases, investigators did everything right for the time period. They collected what they could. They preserved evidence. They documented the scene. They sent items for testing. But the science was not always advanced enough. And if there is no missing person report that matches the location, estimated age, physical description, and timeline, the case can sit for years. That is how someone becomes a John Doe. Not because no one cared, but because the available evidence could not yet speak clearly enough. For the family, the pain is different. They know someone is gone. They may not know where. They may not know whether the person is alive. They may not know if they chose to disappear, suffered an accident, or became the victim of a crime. That uncertainty can last for decades.
Why are unidentified remains cases so difficult?
Because before you can solve what happened, you have to know who the person was. Without identity, you lose the victim's timeline, relationships, habits, travel history, and last known contacts.
The turning point came more than 2 decades later. In 2204, the King County Medical Examiner's Office submitted DNA from the remains to Othram, a Texas-based genetic laboratory, to develop a DNA profile. That step changed everything. Modern forensic DNA testing can sometimes succeed where older testing failed. Investigators can take a small or degraded biological sample and attempt to build a genetic profile strong enough for comparison. Once a profile is developed, forensic genealogy can help investigators identify possible relatives. This does not always mean a direct match. Sometimes the match is a distant cousin. Sometimes investigators have to build a family tree across states, generations, marriages, name changes, and public records. That process can take months or years, but in this case, it finally gave investigators a path. The National Park Service Investigative Services Branch helped locate potential relatives in several states, including Hawaii. Using genetic, genealogical, and circumstantial evidence, investigators confirmed the remains belonged to Joseph Louis Serrao Jr. Authorities say the remains belong to Joseph Louis Serrao Jr., born December 3, 1960. He had last been in contact with his family in 1998. If Joseph's family last heard from him in 1998 and his remains were discovered in 2000, then investigators now have a rough missing person window. That window helps answer questions that were impossible before identification. Where was Joseph living in 1998? Was he known to travel? Did he have connections to Washington State? Did he enjoy camping or solitude? Was he in contact with anyone before entering the park? Was anyone looking for him in another jurisdiction? Was there ever a missing person report that simply never connected to the unidentified remains? This is why identity matters. The moment investigators know the name, the case changes from an unknown death to a real person's timeline. So how was this mystery solved? Not through one clue, through persistence, preservation, and technology. Here is the investigative chain. First, skeletal remains were discovered inside a sleeping bag in Olympic National Park in 2000. Second, investigators documented the scene and recovered personal items. Third, early identification attempts failed. Fourth, the case remained unresolved for more than 2 decades. Fifth, investigators preserved enough biological material for future testing. Sixth, in 2024, DNA was submitted to Othram for advanced profiling. Seventh, forensic genealogy helped identify possible relatives. Eighth, investigators located relatives across several states. Ninth, genetic, genealogical, and circumstantial evidence confirmed the remains were Joseph Louis Serrao Jr. 10th, after more than 25 years, an unidentified person got his name back. This case matters because not every true crime story ends with handcuffs. Some end with identification, some end with closure. Some end with a family finally learning what happened to someone they lost years ago. For investigators, this shows why evidence preservation matters. For families, it shows that time does not always erase hope. For the public, it shows how modern DNA technology is rewriting old cases. The remains were found in 2000. The case waited for the science to catch up. And when it did, investigators were finally able to turn unidentified remains into a name: Joseph Louis Serrao Jr.
Why are these identifications so powerful?
Because a name restores the person's story. It gives families answers, it gives investigators a timeline, and it gives the public a reminder that unidentified victims are not forgotten. Here's what to watch next. 1. Whether investigators release more details about Joseph's final known movements. 2. Whether his family provides additional timeline information. 3. Whether authorities determine a cause or manner of death. 4. Whether any old missing person records are updated. 5. Whether this case helps identify other remains found in remote parks or wilderness areas. More than 25 years after skeletal remains were found inside a sleeping bag in Olympic National Park, DNA testing has identified the person as Joseph Louis Serrao Jr. He had last been in contact with his family in 1998. The case was solved through evidence preservation, advanced DNA testing, forensic genealogy, and investigators who kept working long after the original leads went cold. This is not just a mystery solved, it is a name restored.